Welcome to Compressed and Unplugged, the only show on the internet where we talk about music. We're your only choice.
I'm compressed.
I'm unplugged.
And this is Compressed and Unplugged.
Today, in proper basement show fashion, we're going to be listening to a classic selection from the 2000s, early 2000s Bush era punk revival scene. And we are going to be listening to a selection from a classic, a cornerstone of the punk scene, NOFX, led by my man, Fat Mike.
It's going to be a cornerstone, folks.
The name of the album that we're going to be listening to today is War on Errorism. It is NOFX's 10th studio album. Yes, you heard me right, 10th out of their current 17. This is an old head band. You might have heard some of their classics from back in the day in 1983 when Fat Mike got this group of hooligans together in Southern California they were a foundational band in the creation of the Southern California punk scene, them along with Dead Kennedys and Black Flag, although Black Flag is not from Southern California. And so we're going to be listening to their 10th album, which came out a solid 20 years after they were formed in 2003. And I've got a picture of the little album cover here, and as soon as you take a gander at it, you can tell exactly what it's about, exactly why they wrote it. This is a Bush-era anti-Republican, anti-Bush protest, quote-unquote, album. And indeed, Fat Mike was very involved in that kind of counterculture. One might even say that he was one of the founders of that counterculture of that time. He founded several different organizations that aimed to get punks involved in electoral politics and basically get them to vote out Bush. Because, not a very little known fact, pretty well known fact
That
actually.
worked.
It did, actually.
It did not.
In 2004, Al Gore became president.
This is an incorrect statement. George W. Bush stayed in office for 2 terms. IDKWTF Unplugged was on about here. I kinda thought it was a bit.
He wasn't running that year, but he got elected. And
That worked.
he's sipping some water right now, like the little Kermit meme. 2018 called. They want their shitty meme back.
For context, there's George Bush in some clown makeup on the album cover. You said it, but
Oh yeah,
there it is.
I meant to
There it is.
explain that.
Some really choice font on the War on Errorism part.
Oh, that just gives you early 2000s
It's like
vibes right there.
Impact or something. It's pretty fire.
I think that's the same font they used for Green Day the Musical.
I think it actually might be Impact, which apparently is possibly the one
So
used for Green Day the
unfortunate.
Musical as well.
That's so sad.
There's
Anyways,
so much lore in this episode.
there's a lot of lore. This is a big lore-heavy episode. So this album was released in the midst of Rock Against Bush and several other marketing campaigns and fundraising kind of campaigns to get punks to the polls and get them to vote out George Bush. And this
That
was released
worked.
in the midst of that.
That worked.
Yeah, it did.
It did not.
This album is almost entirely anti-George W. Bush and anti-establishment political music, which actually, this is a little weird for one of the foundational punk bands of the last 40 years, but NOFX, and in particular Fat Mike, was pretty uninvolved politically before 2000.
Yeah.
And
Very-
in
very
2000,
odd
yeah, it is
for a
weird.
punk band.
Yeah, so he went a full almost 20 years of his career before he even voted in a general election. Not even in just a general election, just in general. He was 33 before he ever voted in an election. And that was his first election was 2000, which he voted for Al Gore. Big surprise. After that, he started getting more and more involved, and this is kind of him looking back on the first 3 years of his political awakening, which I think you'll be able to tell in the songs and the lyrical content. This also is an interesting album because it came out right when they switched record labels from Epitaph Records, their original company, to Fat Wreck Chords, which is Fat Mike's aptly named record company that he started with his wife. Yeah, so this album has a lot of themes of anti-authoritarianism. There's a lot of themes of like punky energy, you know, like kind of like a gleeful, like destructive energy, I guess I'd call it. And there's a lot of like he's trying to create an idea of what he thinks Americanness means, which you heard in the song that we listened to earlier, Franco and American, which is not the lead single, but it is the most popular single off of the album. Yeah, and musically, NOFX in general, and I think this album is a really good example of it. NOFX does a good job incorporating different musical ideas into their playing. So as you go, you're going to hear some ska. You're going to hear some ska. You're going to hear some like skate punk. You're going to hear some hardcore punk. You're going to hear a little bit of like kind of poppy synths. You're going to hear like just a good mix of everything. And with that, let's take it away.
Let's jump into this baby.
Now listening to War on Errorism by NOFX.
So, something that's important to understand about the context of this album is it was released in 2003, right? Which was only a couple of years after the emergence and subsequent music domination of pop punk in the mid to late 90s. And that's important because a lot of this album is textually him responding to the pop punk community and him making commentary about the punk community, which now includes pop punk kids. And personally, I have a different interpretation of all of this, which I could totally be 100% wrong. My idea for this whole album is that the reason they put these songs all together is because it's a story of Fat Mike coming to realize the problems with the world and trying to figure out a path forward, a healthy path forward that's not him engaging in acts of self-destruction or him letting his newfound awareness of capitalism and the destruction of the environment and all of these terrible things, him not letting that awareness consume him.
Mm-hmm. I definitely heard that.
For sure. And in this track listing, it's a little weird. It totally could be random. It could have a theme, and then there's some like random bits thrown in there.
There's a few things that threw me off with that, but
for sure, yeah. A couple of the songs just seem a little out of place.
Yeah.
A handful of these songs, I think like maybe 3 of them are from earlier projects that were re-released, recovered and re-released for this one. So that might be it. I don't exactly remember which ones are new and which ones are old, but that might be a reason why there's a little bit of a scattershot way to it. But I think the way I listen to it at least makes sense, if not is the intent behind the arrangement of the album.
Mm-hmm. War and Errorism. I liked it. It was very fast, as he would say, perhaps. It was very fast.
It was indeed. That's punk.
I was really vibing in the beginning. There was a little bit of like, I'm going to talk about it more generally in a second, but a little bit of a lull, or more specifically rather, a little bit of like, there were a few songs in the middle that kind of threw me off, which I will talk about more in specifics. But then towards the end, it kind of picked up steam again for me. So I really liked all of the. There's a few songs when he's like talking, quite a few songs when he references like other bands. That's every song sounds the same, and I think there is a good amount of variety on this. I do think there's like I felt like a little, just as someone who maybe this is just because I don't like love punk music, but it felt a little ironic to me. Like in a lot of the music does sound very similar and similar to a lot of other punks. So it like and I know when people say that they don't like literally mean like you need to like have songs that sound insane, but that was like a little ironic to me, just because it wasn't the most like out there like different sounding thing I'd ever heard. So
I mean, you do also have to consider that punk is a pretty limited form of art, all things considered.
yeah,
There's a very established formula.
there's an established formula. Yeah. So I'll talk about a few of the songs. I really liked the first four songs. I'll say 5 songs. I liked, so that's going to be Separation of Church and Skate, Irrationality of Rationality, Franco-American, Idiots Are Taking Over. Those were like the political like bangers, I guess, those were like, until kind of the end, the most like directly political and just like banging songs, I thought.
I agree. That the first half of the album definitely slaps a lot harder.
Yeah, it goes really hard. I really liked how like just on the nose. I mean, with all these songs, his like writing style is very like blunt, to the point, kind of on the nose. Like there's not a lot of, there are some like, metaphor, whatever, but it's not super flowery for the most part. It's pretty like direct to the point. So that works really well.
He didn't want you to get confused.
Yeah, no, it works really well with like the first 4 songs and all the really political songs. I really liked She Nubs too, even though it was like a very different vibe. It was funny and sweet. There were these like guitars that were really cool, I thought. They sounded cool, and I liked that song. So she was a fan. I just kind of want to hear this story again. Right? She was a fan that met Fat Mike.
Yeah, so this song, She's Nubs, is actually about I don't think quadriplegic is the right term. She was born without her arms and legs, but she was a big fan. I think still is. She should be. They wrote a song about her. A big fan of NOFX, and after she went to a show that they did in Toronto, she met him, and I think they went out for drinks and got to know each other a little bit. And then he called her, I guess, somehow, I guess he got her number or something, even though he was dating somebody at the time. I don't know. He's Fat Mike. Yeah, so he called her later and asked if he could write a song about her, and she said, yeah, sure, of course. Like, you're not going to say no to that. And then he's like, okay, cool, I have it here. I'm going to play it for you. And so she heard it first through her phone, and he called her while the entire band was there, and they had just finished putting it together. And so he played it for her, and she really liked it. That's crazy. And, yeah.
Mattersville was good, too, I guess. It wasn't my favorite, but I liked it. The marimba was nice, and the female vocals with, like, the marimba were really nice. So I had another question about, like, the lore of this one, because you talked about this, but I wanted, like, to ask. So they lived together for when? When did they live together?
Well, so the entire band...
NOFX lived together.
Yeah, the entire band grew up together.
Okay.
In the same suburb. And this is kind of a hypothetical future in which they're all getting old, which they kind of are old in terms of the music industry at this point. But this is a hypothetical future of him and his band growing old and then living in this gated community together with a bunch of old punks and just having basically an anarchist commune, I think was the idea. And it's just like, I love my friends. I want to go fucking live with them and do my vibe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward song.
Yeah, so that one was good. And then we get to Decomposer. And so I'm not sure if I was like, if I really like maybe just misinterpreted it. But there were a few like parts of the song that sort of threw me off, where I was like not entirely sure what it was trying to say. So
yeah, this is one of the ones...
What did you say before we listened to it again? You kind of said that it was like...
Well, so this is definitely the one I have to reach for hardest in terms of this lens that I'm using to
Right,
view the album.
right.
This
for
one
sure.
is kind of just a monkey
And
wrench.
She's Nubs, but that one is kind of just like
I think that one's just him.
it makes more sense in a way almost.
I think She's Nubs, he's using this particular fan as an allegory for the scene,
Yeah.
in that he loves this fan and he loves the scene, and like that's his connection to the world. You know, because these past couple songs we've been listening to before this are all like, oh, the world's gonna end, capitalism is destroying the world, the whales are all dying, what the fuck are we gonna do? And then he comes to this song about, oh, here's this fan that I met that really made me feel good, and I really like her, and I'm just happy that we got to meet, and we got to share something that we're passionate about. And
Yeah.
so I think that is meant as an allegory for the entire community. So I think that one fits in a little bit better, but this one, Decomposer, that is just kind of weird. It's kind of like, I think it might, actually, now that I think about it, I think it fits more with the theme of him, like, kind of shitting on pop punk. It's kind of like him making fun of a love song kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because pop punk has a lot of those, like, you know, those stereotypical, like, scene kid in the early 2000s, oh, I hate the world, but I love you, aha, kind of vibes. And this is him kind of saying, like, well, I hate the world, and I also hate you, but I still want to fuck you. So,
Okay.
I think that might be a
So-
better way to look at it.
I guess I got confused about it, this one. Like I said, sort of threw me off. I said, I'm not really in the punk scene, but I know that women have had to fight for their place in this scene, as they have with many other genres and countercultures. But having a woman as a placeholder for like the poser in this song wasn't like so bad on its own. Because this one I think is maybe one of the most like sort of flowery and poetic with its language. It's not like super direct like a lot of the other ones are. That's why it confused me. But then there was like, everybody wants to save her from herself. They really want to save themselves. But that gave me the vibe of like the like dude at like a punk show or something who's like trying to be like soft and sensitive to this girl who like is a model of disaster with a heart of revolution or whatever. Just like basically like being like a soft guy, a nice guy, like to like fuck some girl at a punk show. That was what that line made me think of. And so this song, there was something about it that was like kind of throwing me off, and it didn't seem to fit the vibe of the rest of the album. That was just how I sort of felt from one listen. I don't know.
I think that could definitely be. I do like that.
Like, I don't think the dude's sexist, but I think that like something about this song just kind of.
There is, at the very least, a latent sexism there. I don't think it was intentional. Frankly, most sexism isn't, though, so that doesn't really excuse it. But I do think that it wasn't a coincidence that it was about a woman.
Yeah, for sure.
And this isn't in the heat of like the girl punk riot, girl like counterculture movement.
Yeah, this was like after.
It was a little bit after it, but it was still close enough. And also close enough to pop punk, which is notoriously misogynistic.
I did not know that.
Yeah, all of those stereotypes of like the punk that dates, he's like 30 and he dates high school chicks.
Yeah,
that's like
yeah.
a pop punk thing.
Gotcha.
That wasn't really a stereotype
Interesting.
before the late 90s.
So that context actually like makes this more interesting, I think. This would probably be more interesting if I really like had all the context for the change and the pop punk scene's rise and all that stuff, but
yeah. And
Okay.
like the
Interesting.
like the peak of the like Riot Girl phase was in the like early mid 90s. So this also isn't too far away from that. So I don't think he was actively trying to comment on this kind of stuff, but it definitely shows you what was going on at the time in the music. And there's definitely some sort of latent sexism in which he used a woman as an object to discuss how he felt about the scene and how he felt about the way that the scene is changing.
Okay, interesting. Well, that kind of clears things up a little bit, I think, actually. But still, I will still say that that song and the next few, this is still the section that I didn't enjoy quite as much because I think it wasn't like directly political. It was like kind of all over the place. Good, mediocre. So I do think that they had a really like good varied sound throughout this album, like you were saying. But just in general, these like music sounds too similar and like people repeat chords or whatever. That like this is just like me personally, that those kinds of arguments always like come off as a little silly to me, you know? Cuz like so much is like repeated and just like reinterpreted ideas. Like nothing's like truly original. And I don't think Fat Mike literally thinks that. I think for the sake of like writing a song that like sounds good and makes sense, that's kind of like the language you use to talk about those sort of concepts of like originality in music.
I think that it's kind of, sorry to interrupt, but I think he's kind of expressing a vague, not really well thought out like anger at the scene, because I think what he's really mad at is the commercialization of punk.
Yeah, and that's way more fair. That is very fair.
It's like punk is a music that they had to sanitize before they could commodify. Yeah. And so I think he's upset that this thing that is like, he started this band when he was like, what, 16? And so this is his life. This is his identity. He's been doing it at this point for 30 years. And then now at this point that I'm currently saying, almost 40. And so like, he's very invested in this. And I think it struck him as like a personal thing when they started sanitizing and commercializing punk rock. And I think this is early enough to where he doesn't know exactly what he's mad at. He just knows that, oh, it just all sounds the same and they're not really saying anything. Yeah. Which they kind of aren't. Like, yeah, I listen to a lot of like shallow, like I listen to punk rock. I mean pop punk. Believe it or not, I do listen to punk rock. I listen to pop punk. I listen to like alt rock. I listen to all sorts of music that is clean and commercial, but so I'm not saying that there can't be content there, but this is explicitly a sanitization and commercialization of a scene that is anti-sanitization.
Yeah, it's like it's very, the like commercialization of pop is very of punk rather is very ironic, like, and stupid. I completely agree with that. For sure. So that just like again comes in, I think, with the context where it's like, in this context, I that's like an argument that like I think holds a lot of weight and I agree with and I like would support. I think that argument gets brought, like, I was like just listening to the words, you know, and I think that argument gets brought up a lot against music that I like, quite a bit, and I think it's stupid in this context because so much of the music I like is like oriented around things like sampling and remixing and like changing things. But like with this, it's a totally different genre, and what he's talking about, the like kinds of like unoriginality that he's talking about are very different from the kinds of unoriginality that people throw at like hip hop and electronic music.
I also want to like
there's also some similarities though with the commercialization stuff that you could apply.
For sure. I think right now hip hop is going through a kind of sanitization and commercialization process in and of itself.
I don't know. I think hip hop, that's a conversation for a different time.
Okay.
I disagree. But it's also true that like hip hop is the new pop. So the hip hop, I guess that's the thing. The hip hop pop it is happening. You're right. But I think there's also a lot more experimental stuff that's exploding right now because of the internet. Anyway,
there's a whole bucket of worms.
It's like the same conversation.
I have a slightly different conversation that is also a conversation for another time, but I just wanted to touch on, I always find it funny when punk rock does this a lot, and I get what they're saying. They're not actually trying to say that they care that they only use 4 chords. They're trying to say like most pop music doesn't really say anything of substance, which is just a fact, because if it did, then it wouldn't be as popular, because there would be people that disagree with it. But they always use this argument of, oh, we only use 4 chords. It's so simple. It's not very interesting. But actually, when you look at the theory behind contemporary music, especially rock, I mean, it starts to get a little diluted when it goes to hip-hop and electronic. Not diluted as in like a bad thing, but like it's starting to morph into something else. Yeah. But when you look at the theory of rock and pop, especially in this time period, it's completely different from jazz theory, completely different from classical theory. It literally could not exist with more than maybe 6 chords at max. And 4 chords is the optimal use of this kind of theory. Just to touch on it briefly before I go off on a tangent about it, basically the theory behind contemporary rock is this 4 chord structure, is that there are 2 tonics that you hear, as opposed to when you're listening to classical music, you can always hum the tonic, you can feel when it goes home. In rock music, there's 2 tonics, and then there's 2 vague transitional chords that go from one tonic to the other. So you can never really tell where the home is. You can never really tell where it ends. You have to listen to the melody for that. And so it's a very simplified version. Not even like a version. It's just a very simplified, completely different kind of theory from anything before it. But like literally, if you might be able to squeeze in 2 more chords maximum before it wouldn't make any sense. So this whole argument of, oh, there's only 4 chords, oh, the world's gonna end, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Cool. Facts. Get owned.
Go back to
You
school,
people.
liberals.
Okay. All right. Anarchy Camp. I think I probably would have had more to say about this song, but I was kind of like finishing up my thoughts about both Decomposer and Mediocre while kind of listening. But it kind of picked up the energy. I liked the ska. The like sax was really nice. 13 Stitches. I really liked the like radio filter, like compression or whatever the hell.
Well, I meant
over
to
the drums. That was cool.
I want to give you a little bit more context for this one too. I meant to say it earlier, but I just didn't. So this song in particular, 13 Stitches, is about Fat Mike's memories of him first getting into punk way back in the day.
I could definitely tell from the lyrics.
And 13 Stitches is about a time...
So it gave it like a really nostalgic kind of radio-y feel, which was cool.
That's what I think that like filter was there for, was because he got into it in like the late 70s when it wasn't very high quality, especially because like the distortion they were using was like stabbing holes in amps. That's like how they got distortion back in those days. So like it was really fuzzy and really hard to understand what was going on. So I think that's why he used that. But also like 13 Stitches, the name comes from, he was at a show and he cracked open his head or something and he had to get 13 stitches on it. And if you like look at this right now, I'm looking at the lyrics on Genius, and like it's just almost entirely links, because there are so many like obscure OG punk scene references.
Yeah, that one was great. I was like not even opening things on that page. I was like, nope.
Yeah,
just a bunch of bands.
These are all just nostalgic memories for him. Like,
this
John
and
Macias.
the previous song. Sorry, this and the previous song were just like full of fucking little Genius links.
Just kind of him flexing his punk clout. His punk cred. Sorry, that's the term.
Oh, okay, cool.
But like John Macias, his name is dropped in here. I didn't know who that was. He apparently, this band isn't on Spotify. They only existed for like 3 years in the early 80s. But apparently they had a big influence on him, and this dude apparently beat somebody to death because he had long hair or something, and he was a punk singer. But like, this is just this. You can tell this song means a lot to Fat Mike, and you can tell it's really something not necessarily that he hesitated to share, but something that hits close to home.
Regaining Unconsciousness was a really good return to the politicism.
Can I touch on something here?
Yeah, sure.
This actually just occurred to me, but this Regaining Unconsciousness is all about class solidarity, right? It's like, you know, they came for the homosexuals, and then they came for the black people. They came for them, now they'll come for you, kind of thing. And I think the title is an ironic play on words. I think he's talking about class unconsciousness, which I had never gotten before.
It's funny. That is funny.
Yeah.
Whoops, I OD'd. I mean, this song was like pretty crazy, honestly. I think the thing that like definitely stuck out with me the most was just like the way he delivered it, like like breaking in between like verses and like just like lines of lyrics, just like cutting them in half, kind of to like give this like last moments of life, like you're clinging on for bare life, just trying to get your last words out. Was kind of the vibe, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure as a guy that's been in the punk scene for at this point almost 40 years, he's had close calls with that kind of thing. He's definitely known and had friends that have OD'd, and so he's definitely seen a lot of this up close. So you can tell, again, that this one hits home for him, and also I think he has a good perspective from which to write it. Especially if my my lens through which I view this album is correct. I think at some point he probably had at least vague, like, suicidal thoughts, and this is him saying, yeah, that's not the way to go, you know? Here's why, there's so much more, you know? And I think I would rearrange the track list in a lot of ways, but I don't think I would ever make this one not the last one.
Yeah, for sure. This was a strong way to close it out, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. More on Errorism. I think we covered it all.
Are you going to add any of these to any of your playlists?
Well, I already added the separation of church and state, and irrationality of rationality. She's nubs, I might add. Whoops, I OD'd. I'll be adding to... I don't know where I'm going to put any of these, because punk is like... I don't normally put it in my playlist. So right now they're just in my monthly playlist, but those are the keepers on first listen.
I'm surprised you didn't say Franco and American. That one's my favorite.
I don't know. I liked a lot of songs a lot more than Franco and American, honestly. I know we listened to it last night, and normally just like that on its own would like probably like make me associate it with like familiarity and want to pick it. But I don't know. I ended up liking a lot of these songs a lot more than Franco and American.
That's a surprise to me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe I'll pick something a little bit harder next time.
Oh, something I wanted to talk about, just like generally, was that there were a lot of kind of like, I think maybe Franco and American had it, or maybe it didn't, I don't know. A lot of like, kind of like guitar licks and like drum lines that weren't like quite in tempo, they weren't quite syncopated. I really liked that. That gave it like a really like unbridled, like moving forward, like energy feel, like in a really good way. So
That's
I
not
that
very uncommon in punk at all.
I'm sure it's not, but I noticed that on a few songs, and it was like there was one song when the guitar started and it like sounded like almost funny, but like I figured it would sound better, but once the beat kicked in, it was good. Yeah.
You should listen to NOFX's first album. There you can
How
tell
old
that
was he then? 16? Is that
something like that. He was pretty young. You can tell that they were just starting to learn their instruments, and his voice hasn't completely fallen yet, because he's still going through puberty.
Yeah.
So there's like voice cracks, and there's like out of time guitar, and like the bass misses a couple notes in one place. Oh, also I meant to say this at the beginning of the episode, but NOFX is weird for another reason in that their lead singer Fat Mike is their bassist. He's not their guitarist.
Oh,
yeah.
Crazy.
Fun fact.
Fun. Very
Yeah.
fun. All right. I'll give this baby a score, and then I think we're out of here.
I don't think I gave it a score, so I'll give you mine after you give me yours.
Okay. I've been thinking about this because I think I'm gonna play it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna give it a 7. I was like considering giving it a 6 until we like talked about it, and then like it kind of made me rethink a few things about Decomposer, Mediocre, especially. Those were the ones that were giving me the most hang-ups. So I think I'll give it a 7. Still, I think that like kind of the middle section didn't capture me as much, and for being a short album, there's a lot of songs on it, and not all of them were like super memorable to me. So that's why I'm going to give it a 7. But I did really like the parts that I liked, and even the songs that didn't stick out as much weren't really bad, especially once we like talked about them and like kind of got that understanding of of the context of the punk scene or whatever that helped. So yeah, 7.
I can live with that. I think this is definitely my favorite NoFX album. And I agree with a lot of things you're saying. Like, some of these songs don't really need to be on here. I'm looking at you, Decomposer.
Not necessarily bad.
It's not bad. It just doesn't really fit the theme.
Kind of takes you out of it just
It's
a little bit.
little
That's how
weird.
I felt.
Personally, I would probably rearrange it if I were remaking the album, but I like the way the track list starts on, like, some bangers and then comes down for a little bit and then goes back out.
Yeah, that part makes sense. Just, like, the flow of it isn't bad.
The flow of it is pretty good. There are a couple of extraneous songs on there, but for the most part, I think it's pretty good. I listen to all the songs on there on a regular basis, so there's none of them that I don't like, even Decomposer. But yeah, so I think I'm going to give this one an 8.
8.
I think it's come down in my mind since I've listened to the full thing again.
It's come down in my mind, too. I'm going to give it a 6.
Fuck
because
you.
I'm
Fuck
just, like,
you.
thinking, even the songs that I do like, there's only, like, going to be, like, I'm giving it a 6. I'm sorry. I did not dislike it. I liked it. 6
Sounds
is
like
still
you
a good
disliked
score.
it. That's not a
Still
good score.
Some
60%.
of the songs, like, some of the songs were like 8s or 9s. Some of them were fire. But
You can give it a 6.5 if that's more reflective.
yeah, I'll give it a. Okay, yeah, let's do digits. Let's just do half digit. That's good.
Couldn't we?
I'll
I
give
thought
it a
we've
6.
always been doing that.
I feel like I haven't been, but
Oh.
that's fine. 6.5.
Okay.
Charlie's an 8.5. No, Charlie's still an 8. I don't know.
I was gonna give this one an 8.5, but just because of the extraneous songs and, like, it's a short album, but it still kind of drags just because it doesn't all fit the same theme, and it's not all really in the same tone. So just because of that, I'm gonna knock off a half point, but
Gotcha.
I'm gonna stick with an 8 out of 10.
Cool. 8 and a 6.5. That sounds right to me. Cool. Sick. Epic. The album we'll be listening to is Homogenic by Bjork. Bjork, whose full name is Bjork Gudmundsdottir. Gudmundsdottir. Bjork Gudmundsdottir. Maybe one day that'll stick. She's from Iceland, specifically Reykjavik. Is that right?
Yep.
Yep, Reykjavik.
Capital of Iceland.
Her music I think the most broad definition that you can give it is art pop, but she's often called avant-garde, experimental, and she dips her little toes into all sorts of sonic inspiration and eclectic kind of. She's got some hip hop inspiration. She's got some like weird. There's like some Icelandic choir passages. I don't fucking know. There's some wacky stuff. Bjork is widely regarded as a pop icon and has been the face of Iceland's cultural exports for decades now. Her discography started at the age of 12, and her career path would eventually have her join several different projects, such as the post-punk band The Sugar Cubes. Her solo career started in 1993 with the release of her album debut, and by solo career I mean not her as a child, when she released she released one album as a child, and did not like the fame that came with it. Even for it wasn't even a pop album. It was I think traditional Icelandic kind of folk songs or something. But fucking even at 12, her pipes are just stellar and amazing.
Damn.
But her main solo career started in 1993 with the release of Debut, followed by Post in 1995. Both of these albums laid the foundation of Bjork's eclectic and unusual style of vocal and music production that is heard on Homogenic, and pretty much all of her music there on out. All right. Speaking on Homogenic specifically, in terms of the themes of what it's about, many of the songs on this album are about love and relationships. Some of the most powerful yet simple lyrics appear on the track All Is Full of Love, where Bjork muses on the power of love beyond just relationships. In this song, you can almost feel the love, the energy, the warmness that it seems she is singing about through the pulsating bass and reverb and delay-drenched buzzes. The album is also about Bjork's growing popularity. While recording the album, a stalker who was upset that Bjork was in a relationship at the time attempted to kill Bjork with a letter bomb and later afterwards filmed himself killing himself in his apartment.
Oh my god.
These dark themes can be felt throughout the lyrics and production of this album. Vocals. As someone who typically finds instrumentals and production more interesting personally than singing, which is, I guess, a bit silly, but that's just how it be. I will concede that Bjork is one of very few artists who piques my attention in both categories equally. Her singing voice is ethereal, mysterious, and captivating. Sprinkled throughout tracks like Unravel and 5 Years are bizarre and impressive vocal snippets and performances that bring a large amount of emotion and intensity to the tracks. And I was just sort of telling Unplugged earlier that as far as like, I mean, it feels weird even calling. She's real like singer-songwriter isn't, I guess, the right word, but like of that kind of like, I don't know.
One-man band.
She really, that is a lot of the music I listen to, I guess, anyway. But she is like kind of, I don't know. I really like with her, the writing is just as important, I think. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of music that I listen to and just don't care as much, but I do care a lot about Bjork. Instrumentals. With this project, Bjork sought out to create an album with only one flavor in regards to the mood and sonic texture. She wanted this flavor to represent Iceland and its extremities and and contradictions, saying, in Iceland everything revolves around nature, 24 hours a day, earthquakes, snowstorms, rain, ice, volcanic eruptions, geysers. But on the other hand, Iceland is incredibly modern, everything is high-tech. That contradiction is also unhomogenic. The electronic beats are the rhythm, the heartbeat. The violins create the old-fashioned atmosphere, the coloring. End quote. Indeed, the album is somewhat limited in terms of its instrumentation, but there really is no limit to where Bjork and the producers she worked on this album with can take these sounds. With tracks like 5 Years, all neon-like and all is full of love, showing Bjork at her most alien-like and transcendental, juxtaposed with absolute bangers. So stupid. Juxtaposed with absolute bangers like Hunter with its driving bass, Alarm Call with its trip-hop drums, and Pluto with its noisy four-on-the-floor beat. Bjork is a personal favorite of mine, and her unique vision and sound are unmatched by really any other recording artist in the world. It's really hard to describe the feeling I get sometimes when listening to her music, and trying to put a label on it would ultimately fall from just experiencing it. And my track spotlight is Bachelorette Family Tree version. Okay, this track was written by an Icelandic poet named Sean. I don't know, S-J-O-N.
S-J-O-N.
And there was like a Shion maybe, in order to give it a more epic feel. That was what Bjork said she was going for, and it does work. Her writing is very like strong, has like strong lyric like imagery throughout. But this song I think is like it is very poem like and epic, and yeah, it's good. This song is about a character called Isabel from the track of the same name from the album Post, and is kind of a spiritual sequel to that song. It is a love song with a decidedly serious and even somewhat dark tone, as the relationship she's describing hasn't exactly been perfect. Game, and I just have like a line that I liked. Game we're playing is life, love's a two-way dream. This line paints a picture of love as a somewhat surreal, dreamlike experience. And then from the chorus, leave me now, return tonight, tide will show you the way, if you forget my name you will go astray, like a killer whale trapped in a bay. And I just said, that imagery though. This song is packed with little instrumental flourishes of accordion, piano, guitar, and more. The drums are very harsh and loud, and in general, the feeling on this song, the mood, is like very interesting to me. One of my favorites for sure. Okay.
This thing dokie, here we go. That was Bjork's Homogenic. Came out in 1997?
Correct.
1997. I gotta say, first half did not impress. Not because of anything that she was doing on the album in and of herself. It was really just like the connotation that I had with the music in and of myself because of like the music I've heard in my life, which is to say, basically the entire first half is recorded with her standing in front of a symphony orchestra, which paradoxically I absolutely hate. And I think it's just because of how much music uses that, especially movie music and like really like cheesy overproduced pop music from the past 20 years. They all use like ridiculous amounts of studio orchestra samples, which I don't like. And every time I hear, especially a female singer, but just a singer in general in front of a symphony orchestra, I always think of Skyfall by Adele, and it is not a good connotation to have. But again, this came out in 1997, so it's nothing that she did wrong as a music creator. It's just I listened to it 20 years late. I'm sure if I had listened to this in 1997, it would have sounded incredible, but I didn't, so there you go. The second half, I did like a great deal more. Starting, I think, at All Neon Like. That one had a really interesting, like, tonal relationship of the melody to harmony. It wasn't really, I keep wanting to say consensual. That's not what I'm going for.
That's kind of funny.
It's not dissonant. What's the word? Consonant. The melody isn't always consonant with the harmony, which is refreshing for a kind of like synth poppy album because like the vocals are usually, rightfully so, not the focus in a synth pop album, and so they don't put a whole lot of effort into tonally where the melody, which is to say the vocals, line up in relation to the harmony. But there were dissonant intervals, there were bluesy intervals, there was melismas, there's all sorts of interesting vocal techniques, which come from what sounds like she has some sort of classical training, and she's definitely using it, and it makes it a lot more interesting. But also that said, starting about that halfway point, they started using the orchestra much more sparingly and much more effectively, if you ask me. So, for example, in All Neon Like, they used a lot more woodwinds than they did strings, which they used kind of in consonance with the synths, which I think they went together well, really well, especially the flute and those high synths at the beginning. And then the next song, 5 Years, just sounds like kind of like a bass-boosted, overblown 8-bit video game soundtrack. It just sounds good, that's all. And then going from there, they started using more and more wind instruments. I still didn't hear any brass, which is a shame, but there was a lot of woodwinds, especially in the last song, All Is Full of Love. The strings were there, but they were basically just a string patch. They were hardly part of it. And there was a lot of woodwind interplay with like clarinets and flutes. Especially, they were like kind of intertwining with synths, which I think really was interesting. Especially in light of the theme for this album, which is her trying to express like Iceland as music. And I think that is kind of a symbolic way to unite like the futurist elements of the synths and the looking back, naturalistic, old school kind of woodwind. Yeah, I think let's give it a rating, shall we?
Yeah. Well, I'll say some things too. I
Do you
guess.
have to?
I'll have just like a few little inputs, I guess, post listening to that.
Let's hear it.
I just
Hi.
sort of listening to this album as a whole, you have to to fully appreciate it, think of it in its context and its time period. It does get a little bit, I would honestly say, I don't want to, not monotonous, but it does get a little bit. It is very much the same flavor as she said. She wanted to do one flavor type beats, I guess. But that being said, I still enjoy it quite a bit. I like the first song. Do you like Hunter?
I like Hunter. That was my favorite out of the first half.
Out of the first half,
sure.
yeah, I figured. I do like Yorga. Okay, so let me think. What am I gonna say here? I agree though. It does have some sort of, it does have some like dated elements. I think not dated, yeah, dated. Just like
I think it's
basic,
just been overused since then.
I also think a little bit maybe basic and repetitive drum patterns and sounds. A lot of kind of the same type of beat played throughout the album. I think the ones that really switched it up were Alarm Call. I think that one had like a very exciting like dancey pop feel to it, and I really like that about Hunter as well. It's more of like a forward moving driving dark pop song, but it still has, I like the pop songs I guess a little more. It still holds up I think as an album, as like this conceptual thing, but just listening all the way through, I honestly just think the way I'm gonna phrase it is just that it wasn't the most enjoyable listening experience. It was a little tedious. There were like just a few parts in like the first 3 or 4 songs where I just like wanted the song to kind of get where it was going a little faster, and like that seems like a lame criticism almost, I guess, but I don't know. That's just how it felt. But yeah, I guess
think
now. Oh.
I also wanna mention, she has a very unique accent, and I think it actually adds a lot, especially in this kind of like fusional synthy kind of pop rock, not rock, but pop symphony orchestra thing. I think it really adds a lot, that just her having that little like tweak in the way she pronounces words, and I appreciated that.
Yeah. There's a lot of character in her like writing too, like moments of like humor injected in.
Yeah.
Just like fun little vocal things that she does, like the screaming and the.
You can tell
gurgling.
even in like the simple songs that she put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah, it is very intentional. You're right. You were saying that you did think it was intentional, and I definitely agree. It is. Yeah. All Is Full of Love. I also just want to come back to that song, I guess, because I really do like that song. The like swells of the bass are not quite like lined up perfectly. I think with like the tempo of the song, like it's very slow and like kind of free moving, but there is sort of a tempo, and the swells like don't quite line up, so it like feels like a heartbeat, like kind of like it's like this very like enveloping sound. Like it feels like your body, like I don't know, it like feels like breathing to me almost, like the sweat, like the wee, I don't know.
I didn't pick up on that specific like idiosyncrasy there. I suspect that's probably something you hear better with headphones, but
probably, yeah.
I did get the vibe. It was like if somebody like made a soundscape and then was like, "Hey, I want to make a song out of this." It's that's kind of the vibe I got.
Yeah, which is like I think pretty fire, but that's like the exact kind of thing that I would. So.
But I gotta shout out Pluto. That was my favorite song in the album by far.
Really, that's so weird. Interesting. Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense given what you've been saying. I thought Alarm Call you would have liked, but
I did like Alarm Call. Definitely anything after All Neon Like to the end, I liked. Those were all
I think they were
songs
a lot better
I would
too.
listen to on my own. But Pluto, it was just unique. I think it might have been not because of the monotony, I don't want to use that word, but because of like their very uniform texture up until then, and then it comes in with these loud staticky synths and a really hard bass line, and then there's like vocal production, and she's pairing the vocal production in a very interesting way with her vocal performance.
Yeah. It's very good for like portraying emotion too. Like there's so much like raw emotion and like vulnerability on like so many of the things she's talking about, where it's like crazy that it's just like crazy vulnerable like shit, and then I think that like helps like the performance and the effects when they all kick in. They help that side of it. It's like it's a little more stagey, right? Like just like singer in front of an opera in the first half, and then like it gets a little more produced and I don't know, a little better. I think.
I think we can definitely agree the second half of the album is best.
Yeah.
Better of the two, I guess, is a better way to put that. A best way to put that.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have anything else?
No, that's gonna be I think about it.
Alrighty, let's give her a rating. You go first.
All right. Fuck. I'm feeling. This is definitely lower than I thought it was gonna be going into this. I will say that much. 7.5.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I was fully prepared to give this a 5.5 or 6 until All Neon Like, and then I was fully prepared to give this a 6 until Pluto and All Is Full of Love, which are the two best songs, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna bump this up and give it a solid 7.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's good. I feel that's like pretty fair, honestly. I would agree.
There you go.
And my score's pretty close.
Yeah.
Wow. Wowee.
What if we agree on one? What does that mean?
Fuck, I don't think that would be very good.
We can't agree on
That would
one.
be like a bad thing. That would be like a bad.
We just narrowly dodged a bullet there. 0.5 away.
Whew, goddamn, Bjork almost. That would be like breaking the simulation. Imagine if our scores flipped on something. That would be insane.
Oh my god. I'm gonna play like some fucking pop punk album from my childhood, and you're gonna resonate with it. And I'm
Oh
gonna
my
hate
god,
it.
that could happen.
I hope it
If you
doesn't.
did something like that, that could honestly happen. That would be insane. If you did score flop.
We'll see.
All right, wow.
We'll see. There's only one way to find out. That's why you gotta keep listening.